The winter of 2026 won't just be cold because of the temperature. It will also be cold because of the uncertainty surrounding housing support resources across Ohio. In December 2025, the Ohio Capital Journal reported that changes to HUD's fiscal year 2025 Continuum of Care (COC) funding announcement had caused deep concern among Ohio's homelessness advocacy groups. According to the cited advocacy groups, if these adjustments are fully implemented, thousands of people risk losing their current housing stability. Simultaneously, the National Alliance to End Homelessness published an analysis showing that new limitations on fund allocation structures could reduce investment in long-term housing programs, which are considered fundamental to helping people maintain stable housing after leaving shelter. According to Politico, these changes have been debated at the federal level and faced legal challenges, leading to some provisions being temporarily halted pending further review. This means the budget picture remains unclear. However, for local organizations, the constant delays and changes have created significant pressure in the planning process. The COC system not only funds emergency shelter, but also provides counseling, connects people with medical services, supports employment, and offers long-term stability for those experiencing a housing crisis. With rents continuing to rise in many parts of Ohio, as evidenced by The Guardian's recent analysis of the Toledo market, the uncertainty surrounding funding is fueling concerns among communities that local welfare systems could be overwhelmed. This isn't just about the budget numbers. It's about the stability of families struggling to keep their homes during the winter. And while resources are still under consideration, cities and organizations in Ohio must prepare for all scenarios, even the most challenging ones. Note: to help viewers gain a clearer, more objective, and comprehensive understanding of the impact of social ills, we may use images from other areas with similar conditions and situations. If you live or are present in such areas, please share your observations and opinions in the comments section. These contributions will help us improve and update the content in future videos. Thank you. If you want to understand the true pressure of the housing crisis in Ohio, Franklin County is the first place to look. According to the official report from the Community Shelter Board, the January 2025 point-in-time count recorded 2,556 people experiencing homelessness in the county, a 7% increase from the previous year. This figure was collected overnight through a coordinated system between social organizations and local government. What's noteworthy isn't just the total increase, it's the structure of that increase. According to the Community Shelter Board's analysis, the majority of the increase comes from people needing emergency shelter within the shelter system, rather than a sharp rise in the number of people sleeping outdoors. This indicates that more and more people are turning to the official support system, and that system is operating at very high capacity. A WOSU public media report from early 2026 quoted local leaders as saying that family shelters and shelters for single adults are frequently fully booked during the winter. As temperatures plummet, demand outpaces the availability of additional beds. Last winter, according to Community Shelter Board data cited by 10TV, the number of people using warming centers nearly doubled compared to the previous year. This isn't just a temporary response to the weather. It reflects the increasing vulnerability of many low-income households. Another factor highlighted by CSB is the prolonged stay in shelters. When the supply of affordable housing doesn't increase quickly enough, many people stay in shelters longer because they can't find suitable housing that fits their current income. This creates a bottleneck effect. New people needing assistance have difficulty accessing available space. According to a CSB report, the percentage of households with children requiring shelter in 2025 will remain high compared to pre-pandemic levels. Local experts attribute this trend primarily to rising rent costs, cost of living inflation, and job insecurity. Franklin County also highlights another reality. An increasing number of people are experiencing homelessness for the first time. This is no longer a story confined to a specific population group. The system is now accommodating many individuals who previously had stable rental incomes but have experienced unexpected economic hardship. Authorities in Columbus emphasize that investing in preventative measures, such as short-term rent assistance or homekeeping counseling, can help alleviate pressure on shelters. However, these programs rely heavily on federal and state funding. It's worth noting that Franklin County is not the poorest area in Ohio. It is a major economic hub with job growth in many sectors. But even here, the gap between income and rent continues to widen. Franklin County thus becomes an important indicator. When a county with a relatively strong economy still sees an increase in the number of people needing housing assistance, it shows that the problem is not just with individuals, but with the structure of the housing market and the social security system. And if this trend continues into 2026, the pressure on the entire support network in Ohio will only increase.
Extreme weather and survival pressure.
In late January 2026, Ohio experienced one of the coldest winters. According to official warnings from the Ohio Emergency Management Agency, many areas in the state recorded perceived wind chill temperatures ranging from -10 degrees Fahrenheit to -25 degrees Fahrenheit. The agency advised residents to limit their time outdoors and seek safe, warm shelter. For those with homes, it was a reminder of the harshness of the weather. But for those without stable housing, it was a daily struggle for survival. In Cleveland, according to IdeaStream Public Media, a new winter shelter opened in January 2026 to meet the increased demand during the severe cold spell. Community organizations reported a significant increase in the number of people seeking shelter whenever temperatures dropped to dangerous levels. This wasn't just the case in Cleveland. In many other cities, warming centers had to stay open longer than planned during the extreme cold. Volunteers and social workers described this as the busiest time of year. According to analyses by public health experts cited in local news reports, prolonged exposure to sub-zero temperatures can seriously harm health, especially for the elderly, children, and those with underlying health conditions. 5. In this context, every sleeping space in the home becomes more important than ever. Another fact noted by local authorities: many people choose to sleep in their cars to avoid direct cold drafts. However, this is only a temporary solution. Enclosed spaces that are not adequately insulated still pose health risks when temperatures drop significantly. According to housing assistance organizations in Ohio, winter is often the most stressful time for the system. When shelters reach maximum capacity, staff must coordinate quickly to find alternatives, from temporary hotel rooms to opening additional emergency shelters. Cold weather does not create homelessness, but it exacerbates existing difficulties. According to local reports, the number of deaths from homelessness in the greater Cleveland area in 2025 will be commemorated by the community at a higher rate than in previous years. Memorial services are often held to acknowledge the losses and call for increased support. This is not described as an isolated event. It is a sign that when the social security system is strained, the impact of extreme weather can become more severe. In the coldest weeks of 2026, social organizations in Ohio are emphasizing a simple message. Access to stable housing is not just an economic issue, but a safety issue. When temperatures drop below safe levels, an apartment key can become the deciding factor between stability and health risk. And that's why this winter, the housing crisis is no longer an abstract story. It's inextricably linked to every gust of cold wind that blows across Ohio. While Columbus illustrates the increasing pressure on the shelter system, Toledo reflects a deeper cause. The housing market is changing too rapidly relative to people's incomes. In February 2026, The Guardian published an investigative report on Toledo, describing the city as one of the emerging housing hotspots in the Midwest. According to the article, rents in Toledo have increased 43% since 2021. During the same period, the incomes of many local workers have not increased proportionally. This creates a widening gap between the cost of living and affordability. The article also quotes local officials as saying that the number of people without stable housing in the area has doubled in recent years. This is a worrying increase for a city once considered to have a relatively affordable cost of living. One key factor mentioned is the increased activity of real estate investment firms. According to The Guardian, in Lucas County, where Toledo is located, investment entities have purchased a large number of homes in recent years. As housing shifts from individual ownership to large-scale investment models, rents are often adjusted to the broader regional market rather than local incomes. This is not unique to Toledo. But here, the impact is more rapid and apparent. According to housing analysts interviewed in the article, when a city that once had low rents begins to attract outside investors, the market can change within a few years. Long-term tenants face sudden price increases when their contracts renew. Toledo is also seeing a return to pre-pandemic levels of evictions, according to reports cited in the investigation. As emergency COVID-19 support programs ended, many households lost the temporary financial buffer that had helped them maintain their rental agreements. As a result, more and more families are finding themselves in a precarious situation. A single event, such as temporary job loss, unexpected medical expenses, or a surge in bills, could cause them to lose their stable housing. Social organizations in Toledo report an increase in first-time seekers. These aren't people who have lived in homelessness for years, but rather households that previously managed to cover their living expenses. According to housing experts quoted by The Guardian, the core problem isn't a single factor. It's a combination of rising rents, limited supply of affordable housing, and significant investment flowing into the residential housing market. Toledo thus becomes a prime example. When housing costs rise faster than incomes in a short period, the social assistance system faces greater pressure. And as winter 2026 approaches, the gap between affordable and unaffordable in Toledo appears to be narrowing. This raises a major question for the entire state of Ohio. Can cities control the housing market before more families face instability? Marcus is a representative figure, but his story reflects a trend already evident in Ohio's economic data. Over the past 2 years, many industrial areas in Northeast Ohio have continued to face pressure to restructure production. According to labor market data released by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services at the end of 2025, several traditional manufacturing sectors are experiencing job losses, particularly in counties that relied heavily on factories and supply chains. Simultaneously, economic analysis from the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland in its 2025 regional reports shows that the cost of living is rising faster than wages in many segments of the workforce. As rent, insurance, and food prices rise simultaneously, contract or hourly workers are among the first to be impacted. Marcus used to work in a component assembly plant near Akron. His contract ended when orders declined. Finding a new job isn't impossible, but starting income is lower, while rent has adjusted to the new market. According to a report by Policy Matters Ohio, median wages in many unskilled jobs in Ohio haven't kept pace with rising rents in many industrial cities. This leaves a segment of the workforce, even those with jobs, in a situation where expenses exceed income. In this context, even a single month of unemployment can create a financial gap that's difficult to bridge. According to an analysis by the National Alliance to End Homelessness, an increasing number of people experiencing homelessness are first-time homelessness, largely stemming from economic instability rather than long-standing personal factors. Marcus didn't have significant savings. As his emergency fund dwindled, he was forced to move into his car. This is a common choice for many single workers to avoid sleeping outdoors while continuing their job search. According to support organizations in Summit County, the number of people seeking housing counseling due to temporary job loss increased in 2025. This aligns with trends noted in regional economic reports. Marcus's story illustrates a key point. The housing crisis doesn't just affect those who are unemployed for extended periods. It also impacts workers who were previously stable but lack the financial resilience to weather short-term fluctuations. With rental costs remaining high, the gap between stability and instability can narrow in just a few months. Marcus is still looking for work. He's still applying every week. But in the winter of 2026, when temperatures plummet and the cost of living remains high, the journey back to a stable rental apartment will be longer than he anticipated. And his story reflects a broader reality. When the local economy fluctuates and the housing market fails to keep pace with incomes, workers like Marcus can become the most vulnerable group, even as they struggle daily to maintain stability. Not all homeless people sleep outdoors. A growing segment in 2025 to 2026 is families living in their cars, a less visible, but no less stressful form of housing instability. According to data from the Community Shelter Board, the number of households with children seeking shelter in the Columbus area remains high compared to pre-pandemic levels. While not all live in their cars, local organizations report many families are trying to avoid crowded shelters by temporarily residing in their vehicles. A WOSU Public Media News release from early 2026 quotes social service providers as saying that the need for support for families with children is steadily increasing during the winter months, especially as rental costs continue to remain high. For families like Elena's, representatives of this observed trend, living in a car is a temporary solution to maintain privacy and keep children in school. But it's a choice that comes with many challenges. The limited space makes getting adequate rest difficult. Staying warm and safe during deep cold spells requires careful planning. And each morning begins with the question, where will we park tonight to avoid being asked to leave? According to educational and social organizations in Ohio, children in families with unstable housing often face greater learning disruptions and psychological stress. Even though the federal McKinney-Vento law guarantees the right to continue schooling, constant commuting still creates significant pressure. In addition, according to the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, the PATH program continues to support individuals experiencing mental health crises or dependence on social vices, helping them connect with medical services, counseling, and housing opportunities. Experts emphasize that mental stability and housing stability often go hand in hand. Service providers in Franklin County and surrounding areas report an increase in the number of families seeking assistance for the first time. These are not long-term cases, but rather the result of short-term economic instability combined with rapidly rising rents. According to analyses from national housing research organizations, when rent exceeds 30 to 40% of household income, the risk of instability increases significantly. For families with hourly or short-term contract incomes, financial margins are virtually non-existent. Living in a car is not a long-term solution. It's a lull between two difficult situations. On one hand, rent costs exceeding their means, and on the other, a shelter system with limited space. What makes this situation less noticeable is its invisibility. A car parked in a supermarket lot doesn't tell the story behind it. A child arriving at school on time doesn't reveal where the family slept the night before. But according to support organizations in Ohio, this silent weariness is increasing in 2026. And as winter continues to drag on, the question isn't just how to help families get through the current cold, but how to get them back to a stable home before the temporary becomes a permanent issue. Amid economic and weather pressures, a crucial question arises. What can Ohio do right now? In Columbus, one of the biggest steps announced in early 2026 is a plan to launch a $500 million housing bond program. According to WOSU Public Media, city leaders say this funding will be allocated to the development and preservation of affordable housing for years to come. The goal isn't just to build new homes. It's also to protect existing homes from being converted to higher-priced segments. According to WOSU, this plan is designed to create thousands of additional housing units for low- and middle-income earners, the group under the most pressure from the market. Simultaneously, Columbus is also promoting an initiative called Yes in God's Backyard, allowing religious organizations to use surplus land to develop low-income housing. Information about this initiative, published on the Columbus Forward website, emphasizes a community-based approach rather than solely relying on federal resources. In Cleveland, according to IdeaStream Public Media, nonprofit organizations continue to expand seasonal shelter and rapid rehousing programs, helping people transition from temporary housing to stable housing in a shorter time frame. Housing experts believe that rapid rehousing, if adequately funded, can reduce shelter stays and prevent overcrowding. In addition, according to the Ohio Department of Development, the state of Ohio continues to manage housing development and rental assistance funds through federal and state budget allocations. These grants include the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, LIHTC, and Community Recovery Funds. While not an immediate solution, these programs play a crucial role in expanding long-term housing supply. Experts interviewed on WOSU and IdeaStream all agreed on one point. No single solution is sufficient to solve the entire problem. But as cities take proactive action, from housing bonds and leveraging community land to expanding shelters and rapid rehousing, the system gains additional cushion against economic disruptions. Amidst ongoing federal policy debates, local governments and social organizations in Ohio are working to keep the safety net intact. This doesn't eliminate the crisis entirely, but it creates concrete anchors. A new apartment is built. A family retains their lease. A worker receives transition support. These actions may not receive significant national news attention, but at the community level, they are tangible steps forward. And in the winter of 2026, amidst concerns about funding and a volatile housing market, it is these local initiatives that are offering the clearest glimmer of hope for Ohio. After all the numbers and stories, the most important question remains: what can Ohio do now? According to an analysis by the National Alliance to End Homelessness, years of research show that investing in stable housing reduces pressure on emergency healthcare systems, lowers public costs associated with social crises, and increases economic resilience for communities. At the local level, cities like Columbus and Cleveland have shown a clear direction: expanding the supply of affordable housing, increasing rapid rehousing, and coordinating between the government and community organizations. At the state level, according to the Ohio Department of Development, continued investment in low-income housing tax credits and housing development funds will be key to expanding long-term supply. On the community side, experts recommend 3 practical actions. Support local shelter organizations and homekeeping programs. Monitor and participate in discussions on housing policy at the city and state levels. Share information from authoritative sources to raise awareness. The housing crisis is not a problem that can be solved in one winter. But every policy that is properly implemented, every project that is put in place, every family that retains its roof over its head, all create real change. Ohio is facing a choice. Wait for stability from the outside, or proactively build a stronger safety net from within. And as local initiatives have shown, the answer is gradually emerging within the community.